To order the school committee meeting of April 25th. You have before you an agenda. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Comments from the public? Hearing none?
No, wait.
No.
Yeah. Just say who you are.
Hi, Hadley Dutra. I'm a parent of a freshman at Nantucket High School. We have been communicating with principals and the school committee a bit about this issue with the bathrooms in particular, and just about the safety and security of the school in that regard, and would like to form a partnership with school committee and the administrative team, like a work group that meets regularly and reports to school committee about what we're proposing regarding funding and an implementation plan. So that's just, there's a small group of us, and of course we welcome anyone to join that group, and would like to start meeting regularly so that perhaps in the 45 days or so between now and the end of the school year, we can get something together that might be able to be implemented for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Hadley.
Anyone else? Okay, superintendent's report.
Sure, 1 second. Finishing my notes. Okay. So I'll start with recruitment and hiring. We have been diligently working as a leadership team to recruit and hire for our open positions for the 23-24 school year. Currently, we have approximately 28 teacher positions open across the district and 3 administrator positions. We have been attending a series of job fairs. We've been looking at School Spring. Some of the job fairs that we have been attending are the Department of Education's job fair on April 12th. That was a virtual job fair. We also did the Greater Philadelphia Education Job Fair, and then most recently the Massachusetts Educator Recruitment Consortium at Boston University, where 3 of us attended and spoke with quite a few candidates who are finishing up master's programs and are headed into the teaching profession. We have also had, we will have people attending the Bridgewater State University Educator Job Fair as well, which will happen this coming week. And, we're pleased to have been able to be part of these job fairs. But while we're chipping away at filling our positions, and we have filled 7 so far, the continued worry by far is housing on our island. And I want to make a plea to the community right now to consider offering any housing opportunities that you might have available for our teachers, as we have to be sure that we can staff our schools. So I hope to have more opportunities to share the wonderful things that our teachers do, and the great opportunity that's provided by housing teachers here to our students, the future of the island. So. On the bright side, we have hired our new Nantucket Intermediate School Principal, Becky Janda, and I'm going to read an email that I sent out to staff just today. So, I wanted to share some important and exciting news with you all. Miss Becky Janda will be joining our NPS family next year as our new Nantucket Intermediate School Principal. Becky comes to us from Athol Royalston, where she is currently the principal of the Royalston Community School, a K-6 school. She brings to us extensive experience as a seasoned administrator with over 16 years as a principal, assistant principal, and special education coordinator. Before moving into leadership, Becky served in the classroom as a special educator, a dual language 2nd grade teacher, and a 3rd grade teacher in different Massachusetts schools. She has a bachelor's of science in elementary education and special education from Gordon College, a master's of education in elementary ed and administration from Atlantic Union College, and a post-grad certificate from Fitchburg State in instructional technology. Becky is looking forward to moving to Nantucket for her next adventure, and is and as our new NIS principal. So we're very excited to have her with us, and we're still very sad that Eve Marie will be leaving us at the end of the year. In addition, I want to share on the bittersweet side, Diane O'Neill, Director of Facilities and Grounds for our district, has shared that she will be retiring on August 9th this year. We will miss her terribly. But we wish her all the best for her next adventure. And no more lost key cards to deal with, Diane, wherever you are. So, moving on, just to share a little bit about the Golf Club Scholars, we are very excited to share that tomorrow evening the Nantucket Golf Club Foundation will host their Nantucket Scholar Ceremony. These incredible seniors have been chosen to be Nantucket Scholars. I believe there are 9. Please tell me if I'm wrong. These students have really been chosen through some pretty difficult interviews, activities, meetings, and dinners. And of the 9 individuals, 2 will be chosen to receive full 4-year scholarships to any higher ed institution of their choice. I really look forward to congratulating these formidable young men and women and wish everyone luck for tomorrow. So the only additional update that I have is that as the spring weather gets warmer, we are seeing more bicycles, traditional and e-bikes, on our campus. And I need to remind everyone, students and staff and parents, that bicycles of any kind are not allowed to be ridden on any of our campuses. This means that students and staff must walk their bikes once they are on NPS property. If students wish to park their e-bikes, they must be of age to operate e-bikes, and they must register their bike with their school administrators to receive a sticker for parking. This is an incredibly important piece of information for the safety of our students and our staff on campus. We do not want anyone getting injured or in an accident due to people riding their bikes on campus. So please share that information with everyone you know. It is very important to the safety for all. And that's all I have.
Question?
Not for me.
I just have a question. Of the 28 positions that you have available, what is the breakdown between the high school to pre-K?
I'd say they're pretty evenly matched. If you I can quickly look at
Nope,
the
that's
document and tell you, but I'd say approximately 7 per. And then we do have some that are related to central office as well. Not central office itself, but special education, particularly, that may cross across schools. But around pretty evenly matched, around 7. Fewer at the middle school at this moment, more at the high school, and yeah. So
Okay,
I
thank
can
you.
get you the exact numbers if you want, but it fluctuates. We have changes all the time. We hire, or sometimes we get last minute resignations as well. So
Thank you.
sure.
One thing I'd say is I'm concerned about the electric bikes. They're going 30 miles an hour down the bike path, and the kids aren't wearing helmets. And I recognize that the state has not risen to the bait to try and legislate this, but it certainly is, to me, a disaster in the making.
We want to support our students who come to school with alternative means, especially since our busing is quite challenging, as we know. However, we need them to be safe, and we need them to be following the rules. And electric bikes, as convenient as they are and as quick as they can get students to school, are quite dangerous. And we still have to consider that the operating age is 18, and anyone who's on an electric bike should be wearing a helmet too. So that is a requirement. And just in general, vehicles should not be ridden at all on campus, which means not even scooters. We really should be walking every vehicle on campus. There are a lot of people out and about behind the schools, in the parking lots, in the front of the schools during dismissal and arrival, and it's just too dangerous to be racing a bike through there. It's really important that be that come out. So.
May I just ask a question? So you said the helmets, are they required? Is that a school request, or is that law?
That's law. Helmets are required for electric bikes. They should be, yes.
Wow.
I believe that's correct. They're required to wear.
Well, I don't see many helmets.
Because they're considered vehicles like scooters.
Yeah, I would think they would be, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, presentations and discussions of issues of interest at committee. CWMP update, building needs assessment.
Hello, can I be heard? That's good.
Yes.
I'm Nick Vaughn. It's good to see a lot of you again. I'm an architect with SMRT. Happy to be back at Nantucket Public Schools. I'm here today to kind of explain what Beth and I have been talking about, the next steps for the overall master plan. And the conversation that we had was kind of born out of, we had done a conceptual look at the 25 Surfside property and how to best utilize that for the public school. And one of the ideas is that the ground floor could become offices or meeting space or a conference room, and then upstairs potentially even having a faculty apartment. We think that those things can be done on that space. And while we were kind of flushing those ideas out, we started talking about, well, how does 24 Surfside connect to the existing administration building? So is there a path? How do we get back and forth? And then when you're looking at the master plan, there's this kind of blue blob that sits next to it, and it says future potential school, something like that. It's very ambiguous. It's a strange shape. It's not a real size. It doesn't have a real program, but it's sitting there. And that started this conversation about, like, well, would we ever really need to capture that space with a new school? And what are the demands of the existing middle school and high school in terms of utilization, the types of spaces we might want to have that we don't have? Are there inefficiencies? Are there overutilizations of some space? What can we do? How do we figure that out? So what we discussed is doing this kind of right-sizing space utilization programming for both the middle school and the high school. What we want to do is determine how often spaces are being utilized. Is there a demand that is happening economically or from the student side that wants new programs or new courses? Or some spaces that used to be extremely popular now been retrofitted to something else that doesn't quite serve that thing well anymore, and something else is also not being served well anymore. So it's really trying to find how to best utilize the existing square footage at the middle school and the high school now. And the reason we came to that conversation was to say, all right, well, if we have this many students now, and we have this much faculty, does the space we have now reflect the programming we want to do now, right? So what we mean by that is, even if we didn't grow in students or faculty, how does the space serve us now, especially in the context of a master plan? What we mean by that is, well, what if the space we have now is actually several thousand square feet too much if we were better utilizing the space? Or what if we find out that we're several thousand square feet too small, even if we are really utilizing the space well? We need to know what that delta is today before we even start talking about or looking at a comprehensive renovation or do an addition or even touching that big blue square that we say potential future school. And I think the really special thing about doing this is maybe we find out that we don't need a new school. Maybe the demand's not there. But that space in your master plan has been allocated for some sort of future potential. And I think that's a really exciting thing for the community and the public school system to kind of figure out what that could be that could serve the school beyond it being more square footage of more school. So no hopeful outcomes, no agenda on what that is, but it's really just looking at the utilization of this space now and how that would inform future decisions moving forward. And that's kind of where we're at. We've had a preliminary discussion with each of the principals here, just to kind of I told them the same thing I just told you, so that they would understand the process that we would go through, and they had a couple comments on immediately about what they thought, some of the pros and cons of each of their buildings are. But that's where we left it. And the idea is, moving forward, is that we'll have focus groups. And Beth's very hopeful that this committee would be one of those focus groups that we would talk to. And different faculty might have focus groups. There could be a student focus group. There could be a facilities focus group. There could be a community focus group. And that's just to get kind of unfiltered thoughts, opinions, facts, complaints, and be able to pile those together and then present them to a decision-making committee that can prioritize things that they're hearing and understand what the mission of the school is, especially when it comes to curriculum, where we should be placing things. So that's the kind of 30,000 foot elevation look at what this thing's going to be and the purpose of it. But we're super excited to dive in, and we just spent a few hours here walking around the school, and nobody was in it to get a better lay of the land. And that's about where we're at right now. But I'm happy to field any questions.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Before, if I may, through the chair. Just to share that when I came on almost 4 years ago, the campus-wide master plan was kind of presented to me as this is your new thing, your new baby, and I understood that the idea about this was to really utilize the space that we have on this campus as effectively and efficiently as we can. And we did head in the direction of changing and looking at our athletic fields. Since then, we have put things on hold for that, and that's not a bad thing. But we cannot grind the entire plan to a halt. There are too many pieces that are important, one being housing, and that is something that we are looking at. And the other being utilization of the spaces that we do have, because we are always looking carefully at enrollment. You hear from me every month on what our enrollment looks like, and we have to consider that it is possible that our enrollment may not continue at the same growth pattern that we've seen it grow at, meaning that space, that blue blob that Nick has talked about, may not need be a new school at this time. So in the meantime, what do we do with the space that we do have, especially when we are seeing our big bubble of students come into the high school this year, and we are going to feel that kind of tight sneakers feel with the students and the staff that we have at the high school. So the whole idea is, rather than grind to a halt, let's look at a needs assessment, an assessment of the spaces that we are using, and consider what that might look like in keeping everybody part of this. So I'm really appreciative that you came and were able to share this with school committee. But the campus-wide master plan is a long-term plan and deserves that as well as consideration for all of the space that we have on the campus. So thank you.
Rocky?
No questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have one. Recognizing that this is brand new, do you have an idea of a timeline for forming the focus groups that you would, that outreach?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Beth definitely wanted me to talk to the committee first and get everybody on the same page, everybody at the same time. So no focus groups have been constructed yet. And I and my team will work with Beth, but Beth and the school board and the committee and the principals, they'll be the arbiters of what the committee, what the focus groups are, who's invited, what's made up. We're hoping that it will be as inclusive as possible. I think that's how we're going to get the best results out of the conversations, and it's going to be kind of the richest way to go through prioritizing the different things that come out of each of the conversations. Because clearly when you have these different focus groups, people are going to be focused on different things. Even your faculty might need to be like 8 different focus groups, right? Depending on what's going on. But that's what you want to get out of this too. You want to see how the building's excelling and where it's deficient, and kind of reconcile those things and say, well, is it something that we can do over time in these buildings, or is it something that's larger than that? And I'm hoping that that's at the end outcome what we find out. But the end outcome won't be a design. We won't have a design that says at the end of this is what the new middle school should look like, and this is what the new high school should look like. The outcome should be kind of more of a tabular or programmatic conceptual idea of where the spaces might be too large or too small. That's about the extent that we'll get to.
Thank you.
The only comment I have is I had the opportunity of walking through the high school a couple of weeks ago with Principal Vassell, and clearly they're in need of more space from what I saw. I mean, they have programs where they're sharing rooms, so I'm happy to hear that this conversation is going to happen. I'm sure it's the same at the middle school. I'm hoping to get into the middle school soon, but it's interesting because when we built NIS, it was very clearly a need. It wasn't really a discussion. It was we knew it, and the community was amazing at the support that they gave us in getting that building built. So I'm glad we're having the conversation. Obviously, housing is one of our biggest issues, but I think a chance to look at what a Nantucket graduate looks like and what we want to be able to offer them is a great opportunity to sit and see what we're doing now and what we want to do in the future. So thank you for getting the ball rolling.
One thing you didn't mention was changes in the size of our school population. I mean, we have new buildings being put up, condos, et cetera, that if there's 139 units there, and if they each have 2 kids, that's going to change things. I don't think the birth rate on the island has changed particularly, but I am concerned that we may plan around this, but end up with another bulge that would start in kindergarten and go all the way through.
It's a valid point. I was just having this conversation last week on a university campus where they were talking about one of their master plans, and this particular campus is seeing quite a reduction in their enrollment to the point where they have quite a bit more square footage than they care to operate and maintain, and heat and cool and all those sorts of things. So, you know, they're in this weird spot, and they say this. They say this out loud. They're like, well, you know, if we're talking about kind of shrinking a little bit, what happens if we're the administration that right sizes to the small part, and then 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we have, you know, this clash or this demand that now we wish we still would have had that land or those buildings. So what do you do? And I think that conversation came up initially in our conversation, and it's everything we can do to preserve that blue space and solve the problem, you know, in some other way here. I mean, that's the ideal outcome, you know, because then you kind of have this safety valve in the future where it's like, okay, well, if this other thing's coming, we can use it for this. Or maybe it doesn't get used like was mentioned for school. Maybe it's some other need that the public school has that can be built there. So, but it's kind of interesting because these conversations, like your 3 questions in a row are precisely like the things that we were talking about. It's like, all right, well, who's on the committees? Okay, well, yeah, we know we probably need a lot more space. Where could that space go? And then it's like, well, where do you grow to, and do you end up kind of caging yourself in to a situation that you can't see in the future? So I think that's really the benefit of this process for having these different focus groups, because you want people who are focused on what does the 10, 15-year outcome really look like for us. Do we expect enrollment to increase by 20 students a year? Is it going to be the same? Like, how do we anticipate that? Whereas you also want other people on focus groups are saying, I'm showing up here tomorrow, and, you know, we want to educate kids in this way with these means now, right? So, like, these focus groups, I think, are going to come out with a lot of interesting outcomes that's going to hopefully satisfy most of the people involved. but once it does, hopefully it's that much better of a roadmap for the master plan, right? So when we look at the master plan now, and that's one of the first things that Beth and I looked at each other when we first met, because I was the only architect in a room full of civil engineers and landscapers and plumbers, and I was the only architect. There was nothing for an architect to do there at that time, you know? But I was like, I'm here to kind of see how things unfold. And I think what's amazing about this is, like, we can maybe preserve that space, but we're really tapping into the portion of the master plan that is student and faculty centric. And it's really kind of around the curriculum and what we want to see, the outcomes of that curriculum over the next few years. And no matter what decisions we make, the best ones we make, in 5 years, 7 years, there's somebody else going to be standing at this podium talking about how, you know, we need to revisit the master plan because, you know, we need to see what goes on. But I think that's part of the reality. So we're doing the best due diligence we can right now to make sure the master plan's serving the community the best it can.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Moving on to the district report card.
So, thank you for having us. I am here with Dr. Mandy Bardsley, and we are going to run through the the DZ district report card findings for this year, 22-23. But remember that the report card is from 21-22. We had a workshop last week? No, 2 weeks ago, where we delved deeply into the district report card with administrators and school committee members together, looking at and determining areas that we wanted to learn more about. And this is more of a presentation for the public than it is for the school committee, simply because we did that in a workshop, and we want to make sure that the public is aware of what we looked at and some of the things that we identified as areas we want to learn more about, or things that are going to determine and help us plan for future district improvement and school improvement. So I'll start us off right away with the beginning here. The annual school and district report cards come out every year. The Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed releases this report card for each school and district in the state. The same as a student's report card shows how they're doing in different classes, the school and district report cards are designed to show parents and community members how a school or district is doing in different areas. So the report cards highlight a school or district's strengths as well as any challenges that might need to be addressed in order to make sure that the needs of all students are being met. And there's a report card link below that we can certainly open if we want to. Just to be aware that we are still being affected by COVID-19. And the COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound effect on our 21-22 school year. That was the first school year that we were back in school in a more normal way. But we still had quite a few, COVID was still present, and we were dealing with very high absenteeism because of the need for students to stay home. So that is something that is important to keep in mind as we're reviewing the report card and comparing data over multiple school years. So I'm going to turn it over to Mandy so you can hear a different voice.
So the report card has different categories. In a previous presentation in the fall, we looked at the MCAS data. That's one part of this. So that would be around the second bullet, what academic opportunities are available for our students. But there are lots of other things that are really interesting in here. So it's who are our students and teachers? What does attendance and discipline look like in our district and at our schools? So in this report card, you can go into the district, but then you can go into each school and you can look at the data individually. How prepared are our students for success after high school? How do our students perform on state tests? How much does the district spend per student? And how is our district school doing in the state's accountability system? Within each of those areas, you can dive in and you can look at subgroups. So you can look at all students, or you could look at high needs, low income, English learners, students with disabilities, and then you can look at different demographics. What's not on here is gender or our former English learners. It's important to note that the low income was previously reported as economically disadvantaged students, so it's a little bit off with the data, so it might show that there aren't low-income students in previous years, so just know that when you're looking at it. So we're going to present just a few snapshots of the data that is in here, and then we're going to present out on the findings that the school committee came up with as you were looking at the data 2 weeks ago. So this first is around our teacher data. You can see that our licensed teachers, our teachers licensed in the subject they teach, and our experienced teachers are all a little bit lower than the state. There are opportunities in here to dive in a little bit deeper and you can go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, so you can click on different links. And in this link, you're able to see the demographics of our teachers. And one thing that we're very cognizant of is that the demographics of our teachers do not match the demographics of our students. In looking at some of the student data, this screen is looking specifically at English learners, and you can see that we are at 15% English language learners, which is higher than the state, which is 11% right now, and that's been pretty steady. Something that is really exciting is the access to broad and challenging coursework. We are at 82% overall with our whole district. At Nantucket High School, it's at 90.7%, and in Massachusetts, it's 81.1%. So that is an area to celebrate. Here, take over.
So one of the things that we asked the school committee, along with principals and administrators to do, was to collect information as they were looking at the data in a kind of a notes capture form. And what we ended up doing is taking that form and the questions that we heard, particularly the findings, what were people noticing, and then also some other things around questions. But we'll start with the findings. These are the things that we heard and saw and understood from school committee members and from administrators as well. So in looking at our students and the enrollment, attendance, and discipline, one of the things that was noticed was that enrollment, particularly the state, has been flat over the last 3 years. The average number of days absent for students has jumped to 14 in 2022 for Nantucket. So that was lower in previous years. Nantucket's out-of-school suspension rate is 7%, and that's double that of the state, which is at 3%. So those are just some examples of what we looked at with enrollment, attendance, and discipline. For demographics, some of the findings were around Nantucket's low income rate, and it is approximately the same as the state. So Nantucket is 42%, and the state's at 43.8%. Also, there is a disproportionate number of English learners who are also considered students with limited or interrupted formal education, or SLIFE. So this is different than the state, and certainly an important part of our planning as we go forward. We want to make sure that we are serving those students. With academics, Nantucket students have more access to instruction in the arts than the state. That's an exciting thing to celebrate. Nantucket students perform below the state averages for MCAS, and we understand that that's an area that we constantly need to be on top of. 40% of Nantucket ninth graders pass all of their classes, with math being one of the most challenging classes to pass. We would like to see this number increase by a lot. So we understand that this is an area that it definitely needs attention. Another piece is Nantucket High School has a higher graduation rate than the state, so that's another piece to celebrate. And L's have the highest dropout rate of all of our subgroups. So, and then just in noticing for teachers, one noticing was that Nantucket has 7% fewer experienced teachers than the state. So as you can imagine, there were many more findings and more noticings that happened during this deep data dive. However, it's hard to capture everything that's happening when a lot of people are looking at a lot of different pieces of data and having conversations. So this is what we were able to capture and what people did record. Certainly there is more, and as we've said, going into the district report card can be an absolute rabbit hole. There's so much data to look at. So, in looking at the school committee workshop wonderings, which were questions related to some of the findings that we had. So, if you remember that we looked at enrollment, attendance, and discipline and had some noticings, one of the questions is, why is the enrollment in general decreasing across Massachusetts, and where are the students going? So that is something we'd love to investigate more. Another question or wondering is, what other forms of discipline can we use to consider rather than out-of-school suspension? Because if you remember from the previous slide, we have a higher rate of out-of-school suspension than the state. In looking at academics, one wondering that came about was, what can we do to offer more advanced coursework to students in all of our schools? Another is, what supports are needed for our SLIFE students' academic success? Another, again, is how do we provide more academic support for our grade 9 students, especially in math? Because as we said in the previous slide, that's an area of growth. Can we offer an alternative day schedule for high school students who must work many hours to contribute to their family's economy? So this is an important thing that we need to consider, knowing that some of our students come and must spend a good portion of their day working after school. And so we need to consider that and how we can support them. With regard to funding for students, why does Nantucket spend 33% more on its students than the state? And then for teachers, why are Nantucket teachers less experienced than the state average? You want to take the next steps?
So one of the things that we're required to do is to share the district report card with the community. So there will be an email coming out with a link to it. We will also provide translation and resources and supports when we do so. The DLT, which is the district leadership team, will review these school committee workshop wonderings for further research. And we will use this data as we are building our district and school improvement plans for next year.
Any questions?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Just one, I'm curious, and for some reason this didn't stick with me when we were in the meeting, but the 40% of the 9th grade class pass all classes. I'd be interested to know what the history, I don't expect you to know that tonight, but I would be interested in knowing if this is a common theme, or are we looking at this as possibly a COVID issue? But that's something that is startling. So if that's the case, and we've got less than half the class passing making up all the credits, then we're potentially looking at sophomores having to do extra credit or summer school, something like that. Is that correct?
That is correct. In fact, this year we did have a large number of 9th grade students. So this would be this group, actually, because we looked at 21-22 data. We don't have this year's data out yet because we're still testing. But in looking at that group, we had approximately 20 to 30 students who did not make it to the 10th grade at the beginning of the year. So they were held back, and that's an example. So it is very possible that this is unique to this class due to COVID, but I think it would be interesting to investigate years before to see what that looked like.
Right.
It is traditional that 9th grade is a really tough year for students, and we do see a drop or a dip in students passing courses. It's hard to move from middle school to high school. It's a big jump. It's a real change. So it is, I would say across the state, we would probably see in general a small dip for students moving from 8th to 9th, but this may be a little bit deeper than we had seen in the past. But we can certainly investigate more on that and report on it.
Yep, that would be great. And actually following that same class to their 8th, 7th, and 6th grade, just to get stats on that, I think would be important. Thank you.
Sure.
No, thank you.
Thanks. Dropout rate report.
If I may, answer Pauline's questions, if that's okay, about the 9th grade. One thing that I will mention to you is that when you see that number for the 9th graders from last year that failed classes, potentially that might be one, maybe 2 classes that they failed. So they would take 7 classes this year. They're taking sophomore classes, but they're probably repeating like maybe a 9th grade math, or they're repeating a 9th grade English. So because they didn't complete and pass 7 credits, That's why they're considered ninth graders again, because at the end of ninth grade, they should have finished 7 credits to be considered sophomores for next year. And with the ninth grade schedule, because it's very prescriptive on what they do, they don't have a lot of wiggle room on those credits. The standard policy is, and this is not just a Nantucket policy, it's a fairly across the state, that for students to attend summer school to do credit recovery, they should have made at least a 55. Some schools do a 50 in order to be able to be eligible for summer school recovery courses. Therefore, if they don't do the summer school recovery, then they're repeating the class their sophomore year. So it looks like our freshman numbers are larger this year than they really are. So they're inflated by those students that might be taking one freshman class that they're doing a credit recovery on.
Thank you.
Does that help just a little bit? So it's a little, I mean, but I think you're right. It's taking a look at the cohort itself and looking at how did they do 6, 7, 8, particularly with the COVID and all of that and how that mixed in, and did that in fact play a huge part in it? Or is it just normal ninth grade? Because as Dr. Hallett said, ninth grade can be a tough time because it's a huge transition. Now it's like, you know, the rubber's hitting the road because now everything they take counts as credits towards graduation.
Thank you.
So with that in mind, let's take a look at the dropout rate. So as of, and this, all of this, okay, lost the screen there, but all of this information did come from the DESE website. And as of June 2022, although what I will say is this was probably a March report, our students, we had a total of 550 students in the school. 9 students were reported as dropouts. That's 1.6% of our total population. 7 of those students were high need students. 6 were economically disadvantaged. 2 students were students with disabilities, and 5 of the students were English language learners. 3 of those 9 students were female and 6 were male. And the breakdown of ethnicity: 1 white student, 1 multi-race, 5 students that were Hispanic or Latin, and 2 students were black. So I think it's interesting to take a look at the dropout numbers over the last 10 years, because this past year's number was 9 students. And that seems kind of high, but when you take a look at some of the previous numbers, so 2016-17, the number was 10. What I'm not sure of the 9, and I wasn't able to find that on my own, and I hate to say it, but our data guru, I wasn't able to talk to her. Ms. Johnson wasn't available. Is that of those 9 students, there could be that 1 or 2 of those students returned this school year. So I'm not sure that's a possibility. So what happens is when you take a look at the dropout rate at the end of the school year, adjustments can be made for the October 1 report. So then those numbers change. But I always think it's interesting to take a look at the numbers over time. I know that I just did the last 10, but in the last 12, as I was updating this report, there was also another year that had 10 dropouts. So I don't think 9 is entirely unusual. Of those 9, I don't have the breakdown of grades, but they aren't necessarily all seniors, because I know that we didn't have 9 seniors drop out last year. And what I just learned this year, interestingly enough, is that if a student leaves the high school and goes to the Job Corps, which we have had that recently, it counts as a dropout, which I found to be a little bit unusual. They also, if a student leaves the school and goes to earn their GED, they're considered a dropout until that GED has been earned, and then we have the opportunity to make the adjustment in the dropout rate. So sometimes these numbers change. Some of the strategies that we implemented over the last couple of years, that's a good word, huh? Implemented the last couple of years. We do have an SEI coach on staff. She is shared between NHS and CPS. She has also done a lion's share of the L director's work this year. We could not make it without her. She does a great job, Catherine Norton, and we're very happy to have her on our staff. She is great with strategy. She's also leading one of our PLCs this year on SEI strategies. So it's great to have her be part of our staff. We are continuing with co-observations with administrators and directors. Dr. Howlett joins us also so that we can take a look at instructional strategies that are happening across classrooms, and how do we help teachers implement more engaging instructional strategies. We're doing SEI walkthrough observations where we're going in to look at specifically what are some of those SEI strategies that are being used. We now have more L-supported classes in science and social studies going forward, and it's on the next slide, but I'll go ahead and give you the update. We are implementing for next year a more math L-supported classes and also a new English L-supported class. So we're looking at those numbers because that is a population that needs some support around, passing their courses and being able to stay in school and be successful. We have, we also, the last year, we created a new course for our L students around personal finance that is a graduation credit. It counts as a 0.5 graduation credit that all students are required to take. And then last year, we implemented the Accelerate Academy. That is for students who, and it's really good for our SLIFE students specifically, because if they come in, they're behind in where they should be as far as being able to be on the way towards graduation. They can take an Accelerate Academy course. It's an online course. They can do it in their language, so they're probably very intelligent in that content area. But because of the language that we don't necessarily have to offer, it makes it more difficult for them. So by doing the Accelerate Academy, they can do it in their own language. They can also work at their own pace. We've had some students that have finished a course in, maybe a quarter rather than having to take the whole school year. Therefore, they're able to take the next course and move forward, which is the whole point of the acceleration. So plans that we have, and if you'll note, there are check marks by some and there are some that don't have check marks. Check marks are some that we have implemented and are putting in place either this year or that's already in the works for next year's implementation. Some are without the check marks, or some that we're still working on. And we know that those are weak areas and growth areas that we have to, put a little more work into. So the revision of math and science foundation courses, the professional development with SEI strategies, partnering with the community school. And this is specifically for students that, because we do get some SLIFE students and newcomers who come in, and it's like, and we've had, I can think of 3 or 4 right off the top of my head right now of students who have come to us and said, I'm not going to be able to stay in school. I have to go to work. Because of our culture, I'm 18. My parents are making me move out. I have to pay for my own living expenses. So we can work with them in the community school so that they can at least get their GED, even if they can't, finish and get their diploma. And then also adding more foundation courses. So that was why we looked at our program of studies, and we're adding a course in English and a course in math for the upcoming year. So we are in discussion on curriculum and planning for SLIFE courses. We are adding an ESL teacher for next school year. I actually had a nice conversation with a candidate today that I feel very good about, and I'm planning. Our next step is to do a full interview with that person. And we have requested bilingual district clinician support for our L students, because one of the things that we have learned to help those students be successful is having someone that they can talk to in their own language without having an interpreter there. What I have learned, and it's been a real education for me, is that a lot of our students, especially our SLIFE and newcomers, often come to us with quite a bit of trauma that, was happening in their home and in their home country. And one of the reasons why they are now here is to get away from that. So how do they process those things if they can't do it in their own language? So we are hoping that that's going to be something that's on the horizon. So, and I think that's what I have. Yeah, unless you have some questions.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. I'm just curious, what is the outreach, or how do you confirm that someone is indeed a dropout versus their family suddenly moved?
So that's a really good point, and I appreciate you asking that question. We, through the DESE, one of the things that we have to do is that when we find out students are leaving, we are required to do exit interviews with students, and that's one place where we can find out, like, are they transferring, are they dropping out? They're considered a dropout for us if we can't say, Laura's leaving the school and she's transferring over to, Cape Cod Academy or something like that. If we can't confirm that, what happens with some of our L students is that they transfer, they go back to their home country, and they don't know what their school is going to be like when they go, so they actually just exit the school. So we are required by the DESE to do exit interviews. We also send letters to students and their parents, and we make sure that they know all of their educational options, even returning to the high school if they choose to. But we also collect information from them, like, where are you now? So if a student were to drop out, let's say this week, next year, we would be sending information and say, where are you now? Have you done the GED? Have you completed that? Are you doing something else, or are you in the workforce? So we are required to continue to collect that data, which is one of the reasons why the DESE allows you to do a dropout adjustment. So for the 9 students that dropped out, we may find out that 2 of them actually did get their GED. So now we can make that adjustment, so that becomes 7 as part of our dropout rate rather than 9.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had actually a similar question. I needed to be reminded on that. So that's helpful. Thank you. Is there a way before the school comes to an end for this year to work with Fairwinds, to work with the children who are identifying history of trauma, but not just with our EL students? I would suggest that there's many students who are dealing with trauma throughout all of our schools. Just this week, for different reasons or different ways, I've learned of 4 students from either NIS or the high school who are being evicted.
I just found out about one from the high school today.
And they have no plan. And so I'm just sitting here thinking, what is that doing to our children, our families, our classrooms? I just can't imagine coming in and trying to be focused when
Agreed.
you don't know where you're going to be living at the end of April.
Well, and and we had a student like that last year that we worked with, trying to get them housing, because that was exactly what was happening, is that they were being asked to leave where they were living, and before we could get something set, they had no choice but to leave, so they actually left the island. So, and this student specifically wanted to stay because they wanted to graduate, and they wanted to get their diploma from here at Nantucket High School. It's difficult. It's a very it's a precarious situation, I think, because we don't necessarily have options for housing, which is some of the issue. And quite a few, and again, this is an education that's been for me as the principal, learning about some of these students since I've been here, is that so many of them really do need to go to work. We actually have worked with some of our students and offered like a reduced day, that it might extend their graduation date, but we've offered a reduced day, so maybe they come to school until lunch, and then that way they have released time to go to work so that they can get those work hours in. Or do they come to school and they do like math, English, and wellness, and then they do the Accelerate Academy where they can do their online classes after they've done their work hours. We are working with Fairwinds, and I give Fairwinds a huge thank you because they're actually doing telehealth with some of our students where I think it's, and I may say this wrong, but I know that on Mondays at least, and I don't know if it's more than once a week, but on Mondays, we have students that are scheduled to meet with a Fairwinds counselor through a remote option. So we are working with that. Sherry Lewis has done a great job of, working with Fairwinds to bring that in and make sure that we have that resource. What I will say that's just since I've been here, and this is my 3rd year, can y'all believe that? 3 years? That we have increased the number of SEL support that we have for our students by having the SEL counselor this year, but also having Rachel Merriweather, who's with Effective School Solutions. She's a Tier 3 support person. So those two both were hired since I started. So I think that we're working towards making sure that we have that support for students because, it's not just about the academics when they come to school every day.
Right. I wonder, and I don't know the legality of this. Obviously, you couldn't post it with the names of families, but the conversation I had today was with somebody who's at NIS, and they're already evicted. They're already on someone's couch.
Mm-hmm.
Young children. So could we put out something to parents to say, we have a family, this is the need. This particular family needed it, I think, till the end of the school year.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that we can bring our school community together? And I've got to believe that there's got to be families that have got extra rooms and that, because it's heartbreaking. And
It is.
And anyway, I don't know what we can do.
So one thing I will say is that those families do come under protection of the McKinney-Vento program. So, for instance, we had a student today that I went with Sherry Lewis to make sure that we got lunch for them and made arrangements for to pick up breakfast and lunch for the rest of the week for this very reason. I would defer to Dr. Hallett on being able to put that out, but I can't see why we can't make an announcement that says this is what we're in need of without using names and such. I don't know what the legal ramifications might be of that, so I can't really say. Dr. Gately would probably be a better reporter of how we can do that.
And maybe some education, sorry, Tim, but maybe some education for tenants that in Massachusetts, if you are renting to a family with children, you cannot just suddenly evict them. And I think a lot of families do not understand because the two families I've spoken with were unaware.
Mm-hmm.
And not that you want someone to break a lease or break a promise or anything like that, but maybe something like that could go out to families in all languages so that they at least know what their rights are.
That's a really good point, and I think that's something that we could certainly work on.
So I certainly think that we can partner with Housing Nantucket and a couple of other places that can Safe Place, and there are associations that can help us with that as well, because that doesn't necessarily fall under our school jurisdiction, but we certainly want to make sure that our families are supported. As you said, Ms. Gately is in charge of McKinney-Vento, which is our support for homeless students, and that's important that we talk with her and find out particularly what we can and cannot do. But I agree with you. There are families that do not know their rights and may be incorrectly or illegally evicted when they don't need to. That shouldn't be happening. I also think that there are situations that are agreements that don't have legal leases, where people make a handshake agreement, and that is very difficult to do much about. But I think maybe if the town considered having a workshop for tenants around your rights and had it in several languages, that would be really important.
I wonder too if the families that are being affected right now even know that they have protection under McKinney-Vento, and that there are things that can be provided for them from that.
They probably don't.
Right. Yeah.
If I may, Chair, as soon as we discovered this today, already within the school day, before the school day was over, Safe Place was contacted, Family Resources was contacted. I want you to know our social worker jumped into action, was on
Yes, she
it,
did.
and immediately looped in Deb Gately and spoke with the family themselves about what exactly was going on, to figure out what exactly they needed, and resources were provided. I can't say we in a day provided them new housing, that didn't happen, but we made sure that they had some resources to be able to keep up with laundry, to have food available to them, whatever they needed.
I was very impressed with your stuff.
But I just want you to know that our social workers across all of our
Right.
schools are very, they care deeply, and
Yeah.
they do jump into action.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank
you.
you.
I think
Through the chair, if I may,
Sure.
I just want to correct the ninth grade completion rate.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm gonna actually pull up the district report card if that's okay with you.
Sure.
All right, so we go here and we type in Nantucket. This will only take me a second. As long as the internet works. There we go. And I'm gonna go to Nantucket High School. And it's under the second question. And as we scroll down, so we have our access to broad and challenging coursework, digital literacy and computer science, our advanced coursework completion, and then our grade 9 passing rate. And this is much better than what was stated.
My guess is that notes collection was incorrect.
Thank
So-
goodness.
This still has
That was a
room
little
for
nerve-wracking.
improvement,
Yes.
but the data was not making sense. So,
Well, I thought we would have had more of a discussion if that had been the case, because I was like, that's not
But-
what I remember.
Through the chair, when we were doing this data, didn't we find errors in the data?
There
Yes.
were mistakes in the data through the algorithms that were used, and so we did find some discrepancies. I think this was on our part, not on their part, because we can see what was going on. So I think it was
Thank you,
part of the
Mandy.
note-taking process that we
Yes.
did in the workshop. So I apologize.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you.
I feel better already.
Yeah, 30% jump.
Committee discussions and votes to be taken. A vote to approve, yes or no, to the selection of school choice participation. Academic year 21-22, policy JFBB. So we have to vote on this.
Yeah, school choice participation is, if you remember correctly, we
Yeah.
don't actually do it because we don't have any other choices for our students to attend. If they are an elementary student in grade 2, they have one school that they can attend. They can't choose another school. Choosing to go to a private school is not part of school choice participation. So our vote has to be, unless you want to say yes, I don't know where they'd go, has to be no. So yes.
Okay, can
Yep,
I-
so moved.
Second.
I think it should be a roll call vote, actually.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, it does be, okay.
So Laura
Yes.
says, yeah. So it'd be
we-
no.
Oh, it's no. Okay, got it.
No,
Okay.
no.
No,
No.
unanimous.
I will let them know.
A vote to approve the March 21st, 2023 school committee meeting minutes. Is there
So
a motion
moved.
approved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A vote to approve the April 4th, 2023 school committee meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And a vote to approve transfers and invoices.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, subcommittee work group report.
Negotiations continue.
Okay,
That's my report.
If I may, through the chair, we have, as soon as we can, we will meet for policy subcommittee. One thing I want people to be aware of is that we recently found out that our subcommittee meetings, although we are not considered a quorum because there are only 2 members on a subcommittee, we still have to legally post them. So through the town of Nantucket. So we will do so, and if we need to cancel, then we will repost when we're ready to meet. But just to make you aware of that, if we have other subcommittees that meet with 2 members, we have to post that. So coming up would be scholarship, and those of you who are on the scholarship committee, if you remember who you are,
Yes, Pauline and I.
then we'll have to post that meeting as well.
Natalie isn't here tonight, and
Yes, I did not
she
receive.
sent us a report which has gone into the ether.
She sent an email saying, "I won't be available. Here are my updates," and there is nothing underneath.
Oh. Well,
So I did send an email back saying, "Could you please send that again?" But I did not receive one since the meeting started, so apologies on that.
Okay, agenda
Next
for the
meeting.
next meeting?
So our next meeting is May 2nd, which is next week. We will be looking at enrollment. Our guidance update was actually included in our last meeting, so we will be taking that off. The third quarter budget update and our audit reports will take up the majority of this meeting. We will also have a vote to approve the FY24 budget, which we now have shared with the town, shared with you, and shared with the public. And then finally, the Wellness Committee has been resurrected, and so we want to hear a little bit from them. They've had at least one meeting, so it's good to hear kind of where they're at. So that's what we'll be doing.
Great.
Can I just make a point? We didn't vote the payroll and accounts payable warrant.
Where's that?
It was right at the top of the page, E, but we went straight to subcommittee, and I just noticed it because it's on our iPads. So we need to do that. Right there.
We did transfers and invoices.
Did we? Oh,
Yes.
I was asleep. All right.
No, you seconded.
Well, good for me.
May I add one thing about
Just
future
twice.
meetings? I want to make sure that that you know that coming to you will be a list of some dates around some workshops. May is going to be a heavy workshop month with the superintendent's evaluation, both the evidence presentation of evidence, but also with the actual evaluation workshop. And then hopefully on May 11th, we're still determined. Not May 11th.
Yes.
Yes, I'm getting confused with April and May. We will be able to have a workshop on next steps towards vape detectors in our schools, or additional programming necessary, including thoughts of that in general. So,
If I may,
Will be a workshop.
yes,
I did respond to that. Did you see my response?
I did not. So my apologies.
So I
not
have,
available.
I'm in it's a mentoring group that ends on June 10th. So, and it's every Thursday, 4:30 to 6:30.
Okay.
So I requested either Wednesday or 7 o'clock, which I know is not ideal for everybody, but a 7 o'clock meeting time as opposed to 6. So
We'll determine some new times that
Okay.
are available, and do our best to get this done before May 18th.
okay.
Anything else? Rocky?
No, sir.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
I won't
Aye.
question you.
Aye.
Got it on the tape.
Let me help you carry this out, Beth.
Oh, dear.
I got it. I'll load up the